point I'm trying to say to you is they're a very good investment. And at the very minimum, you will get a nice return. But if China decides we're not going to use these sort of rare earths, which they've threatened to do again, that's when you could see prices spike.
Welcome to the Average Joe Finances Podcast. Are you trying to get out of debt, invest, or just not sure where to start? Then this is the place for you. We discuss different ways to get out of the rat race and build your wealth. Join us on this wild ride to financial freedom.
Hey, welcome back to the Average Joe Finances Podcast, everybody. I'm your host, Mike Cavaggioni, and today's guest is Louie O'Connor. Louie, I'm super excited to have this conversation with you, especially because you are calling in all the way from Ireland right now. And here I am in the middle of the Pacific, so huge time difference. I think, 13 or 11, somewhere between 11 or 13 hours, I think, between us right now. Really excited. So thanks for joining me today.
Thank you, Mike. A pleasure to be here with you. Yeah, I'm in Tipperary in Ireland, and technology is just great, isn't it?
Technology is great. It's one of the beautiful things that we have right now that we can actually have this conversation from thousands and thousands of miles away. Absolutely amazing. Louie, I'd like to start this off and ask you the same question I ask everybody that comes on this show. And we want to know more about you. We want to know who you are, what you do, why you do what you do. So if you could share with us, who is Louie O'Connor?
So Louie O'Connor is Irish, born in Dublin, spent some time in Germany career-wise. I lived in Germany for 10 years and then spent about 15 years in Latin America. I worked in property and real estate. I had my own little tour company where I was bringing mostly North Americans, Canadians, US, around Panama, Nicaragua, and then Colombia later on as well. And I just returned back to Europe 2 years ago for this business we're about to talk about. I first came across it in 2017 as an investor, because it's not as a business, but as something I was interested in investing in and liked it so much. I thought I'd like to get involved as a partner as well.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Louie, you've kind of run the gamut, right? You've lived all over the world. So you were born in Dublin, moved to Germany, right? You lived there for a while. Then you spent 15 years in South America. And while you were there, you said you were doing real estate and you had your own Turo business. So were you doing like rental cars, or what was that all about?
It was basically called Panama Retirement Tours, and it's still going, and I might even get back to it. I'm still a resident of Panama. My wife is Mexican, but she grew up in Panama. So we're in Ireland at the moment. But I suppose you could say I'm a bit of a nomad, a bit of a libertarian. And I suppose there's no holy grail, Mike. You know yourself, as 20 years in the Navy, seen a lot of the world. There's no Shangri-La. Like each country, America has fantastic things going for it. So does Ireland, so does Panama. But there's not one that really ticks all the boxes. What I learned is if you can't find it all in one place, why don't you do your banking in where the banking is best, and do your business where the business works best, and have your residency where. So yeah, that's pretty much what I've gathered or learned over the years, is try and diversify everything you do, your banking, your business, your residencies, your passport. So I guess you're getting to know I'm a bit of a libertarian.
Yeah, no, that's wonderful. So it's not only diversify what you invest in, but diversify just life in general, right? So you get to experience the things that you've been able to experience, right? You're more of like a world citizen, right? Not tied down to any one particular area. You can go do what you want to do, but you're able to do that, I think, because of the things that you've done in your past by building businesses and investing in different things. So one of the things I want to talk about is what you're currently doing right now. So I know you were doing real estate, you've got the tour business down in Panama, but now you're focused more on doing something with precious metals, right? And rare earth metals. So I'd like to talk about that a little bit. So what are you doing in that space right now?
Okay, it's mostly rare earth metals. We do offer precious metals as well, but what attracted me, if you will, to this opportunity was for the first time, and now this is since 2010, but it's still a relatively new asset class. It's only been around for 12 years. So for the first time, private investors, you don't have to be institutional, or you don't have to be accredited, and our minimum investment is $10,000. But private investors can buy rare earth metals and store them. Just same paradigm actually as gold and silver, except the rare earths have a sort of an intrinsic value, whereas gold and silver has most part an extrinsic sort of a perceived value. And that's sort of, I got excited about that because I suppose one way to explain it as well, Mike, is rare earths are, a lot of people call them the technology metals or even the green metals because of solar power, wind power. So essentially what they are is they're the raw materials in how we conduct our daily lives. I have my smartphone here. Because of indium, one of the metals we offer, you can swipe on a phone. There's about 12 rare earths in one smartphone. They're in the devices we're using right now. They're in the speakers, actually, the magnets in the speakers. But they're also critically needed for powerful magnets in electric cars, in wind turbines, in solar, aviation, military applications, shields for nuclear reactors, medical devices, semiconductors, computer, you name it, they're in it. But previously, investors didn't have an avenue to buy them and store them. And the reason for that is because the only end buyer for these products are industry buyers. So I came across an industry buyer from Germany back in 2017. My first interest was as an investor, did my due diligence, went to Germany, went to see the vault where they store them in Frankfurt, and realized that these guys are in business 30 years. They're a bona fide industry supplier. So what we do primarily, like 80% of what we do on a daily basis is we buy these materials, mostly from China, because China is the dominant market leader in rare earths. And then we resell them to industry buyers. So we've clients in more than 70 countries that buy these metals. So that's primarily what we do. And if it wasn't for that, we couldn't offer the investment side because we have access to producers and we have access to the buyers. So 12 years ago, we bought a vault. It used to be a bunker in World War II in Frankfurt, 2 levels below the ground, converted it to a fully insured, bonded, duty-free zone with bank level security and stuff. And since then, we've been offering this mostly in Europe. It hasn't been exclusive, but we already had about 200 US clients before we started to actively market in the US, but you would have taken a great deal of effort to find us. So yeah, that's basically it.
Yeah, Louis. So I was writing some things down as you were talking. And when you think about these rare earth metals, like you said, looking at them as like the tech metals, right? I have solar panels on my house, right? I have a smartphone, my laptop that I'm talking to you through right now, the camera, my microphone, my headphones. You don't realize how many rare earth metals you have in these pieces of technology that you use. And when you're talking about the intrinsic value of that versus the extrinsic value of like precious metals, right? Where that's a value that basically for those, it's what we believe it or perceive it to be. And anything is really valued that way. But when it comes to these metals, these rare earth metals that are used in technology, there's a supply and demand value that comes with that as well. And that's one of the things that makes it so much more of a tangible asset versus some of these other precious metals that people just like it because it looks fancy, right? This is something that is tangible, that is used. If you look at the market today, and you look at what's blowing up right now, like the EV market and things like that, they need a lot of these these rare earth metals to make these vehicles, to make the batteries, to like you said, the magnets that go into them. So that's huge. And when you were talking about how the larger industry had monopoly on this, there was nowhere for the little guy, the average Joe, to get involved in something like this. But now you have a business where you're essentially kind of like wholesaling the rare earth metals to these larger industries and letting the average person get in there and get a piece of this pie as well. So that's one of the things I wanted to point out here, especially for my real estate investors that listen to this. You guys know what wholesaling real estate is. To me, looks like a way to wholesale rare earth metals to these larger industry buyers. So I think that's very interesting. And then also to have that out there in Frankfurt. I've been to Frankfurt before. I flew in there when I was coming back from Iraq, and I know that there was a whole bunch of different bunkers and stuff in that area. So looks like you were able to lock in a really good spot to have as your where you're storing everything. Obviously going to have a lot of space. So as you're buying these rare earth metals from China, do they get shipped in over there and then you transport them to where you store them? Or do you start distributing it right away to your buyers, or does it depend on the actual demand?
Yeah, actually, you pretty much nailed it there, Mike. That's pretty much what we do. We're able to invite private investors, private citizens for the first time to participate in this industry because we are an industry buyer. Now, look, it's a sort of a partnership with us. So we make some money. Obviously, we make a profit as well. But when you, probably a bit later, we'll get into some of the numbers. When you have a look at the returns, you'll see they're very healthy. But yeah, our storage facility in Frankfurt now has 200 metric tons of rare earths, which is over 200,000 kilos. It's the largest inventory of rare earths anywhere in the world outside of China. And everything you mentioned there, all three. For example, if an investor buys metal, let's say this week, we close a deal this week, it'll take about 30 days for their raw materials to come, between 4 to 6 weeks. Once they come, then we assign them to the vault because the investors, obviously, that's where they want to keep them and store them. But in all of that inventory, less than 20% is investor owned. Most of the rest of the inventory is ours that we're selling on a daily basis. Some of it is actually some industry buyers themselves. They don't have a need for all the metals they've ordered right away and they store them with us because some of them are in metal form, but some of them are oxides, which are a powdered form. And they need certain conditions. If they're not stored correctly over, say, long periods of time, they can lose their purity level. The conditions have to be right for that as well. But yeah, just exactly what you said, you pretty much nailed it. Private citizens, private investors can, for the first time, and I can say this as well with certainty, Mike, if I'm stating a fact, I'll give it to you as a fact. If it's my opinion, I'll tell you. But the fact is, right, that at the moment, we're the only industry and supplier in the world that actually does this. There's nobody else doing it. And I say that sort of as a cautionary word as well, because if I was just sort of a sales and marketing company, this wouldn't work because I don't have, how do I know I'm getting pure 99.99% valum or gallium, I should say, or indium or whatever it is. And how do I have access then to the exit, to the liquidation? So yeah, you must be buying from an authentic metals trader. And unless they're providing the exit too, there's no point in doing it.
Yeah. So not only do you have the option to buy with your company, but you also, you have that exit as well when you go to sell. So now somebody that wants to, so you said you have what, 20% of what you have stored right now is also investors, right? That are making these purchases. So out of that, so if somebody wanted to buy, let's say some, what was it, like indium? Somebody wanted to buy some indium and store it there, is there like a time limit that you guys will hold it for? Or can you hold it until they decide they want to sell? Guys, they're sitting there watching the value and stuff, and maybe they're trying to flip it or something like that. It's similar to what people do when they buy and hold stocks and they see this really large jump and then they want to sell it for a profit. Is there a time limit that you guys have that you'll hold these metals?
Yeah, good question. Look, the client, you can hold them indefinitely. You can actually store these materials indefinitely in the right conditions. And we recommend a sort of a medium to long-term play. If you really want to make it worthwhile and make a decent amount of money, do a medium, which would be either 3 to 5 years, or long term, which is 10 years. And I'll tell you a bit more about that in a minute. But the truth of it is, once those metals arrive to the vault, they're your metals. If you want to sell them a week later, that's entirely your prerogative. You own them. You can keep them for as little or as long as you like. But I would add one thing to that, which is the vault is it's a free trade zone. It's a Zolllager, as they say in Germany. Once they arrive, if you keep them there for at least a year, there's no VAT, there's no VAT, or there's no import duty. So you can make your purchase and your sale tax-free, at least in Europe anyway, because I know the US citizens have to do their own reporting outside of that. And I'm obviously not going to speak about that. I'm just speaking about Europe, that the purchase and sale can be tax-free in Europe if you've held them for a year. But to answer your question, it's up to the client. Last year, for example, we had two or three of our metals double in price. So if you'd put in 100,000, your portfolio was at 200,000. So it makes sense to liquidate some of them then, if not all of them. The reason that happened was China they doubled the production of electric cars in China last year. So they didn't export as much as usual, so the prices internationally went up. We'll talk a bit more about China in a minute, but China pretty much dominates the production, the refining, the supply, and crucially now the price.
Yeah, that's good to know, especially when you're thinking about like how you're going to gauge where the market for these metals might go. Is you want to pay attention to what's going on in China, right? So you want to pay attention to, example, like you just said, what's their electric car production look like? Since they made that increase, of course, there's going to be less coming out. Tesla even opened a factory out there as well. And when that happened, you're seeing less of those raw materials getting exported because they're keeping it in-house. So that's definitely important to know. So what are your thoughts on that? Like, how do you pay attention to what's going on there? Because I know sometimes it could be difficult to see what's going on in China, right? Because of the way that their government is structured. There's a lot of that information is not really going to get out. So what do you do from your side to try to stay ahead of what's going on and ensure that you're still being able to provide these metals to your investors?
Okay, there's a number of things. A simple thing actually one of the greatest tools I found is to do a Google alert. If you do a Google alert for rare earths, within about 2 weeks, you'll get a clear picture of what's happening in rare earths, but in whatever industry. But look, a lot of these opportunities are hidden in plain sight. Look, it's not possible, say, for me to be savvy on every sort of investment. Like you're in Hawaii, and it's not possible for me to be, say, up to date on real estate in Hawaii. It would be because you're there and that's what your business is. China hasn't been shy about this, right? If you look, and it's in the open, it's in the public domain, Chinese, they call it the Futures Policy 2025, that clearly states for all the world to see that their goal was by 2025 to be self-sufficient domestically in 10 different technologies. And they're close to reaching that goal. If you look at the charts, you'll see in the 80s, the US was the dominant market. The US was producing 60% of the world's rare earths, and Chinese were producing less than maybe 10, 12%. But the premier of China in 1987 made a very telling statement, a very shrewd statement, actually. And he said this standing on a rare earth mine. He said, the Middle East has oil, China has rare earths. That was 1987. Fast forward 30 years later, and China now dominates the market. The US only has one. I'm only talking about the US because your audience is North American. Europe is in the same boat. But the US only has one producing mine at the moment. It's Mountain Pass in California. And they still send their raw materials to China to be refined. So at the moment, Europe, the West, knows they need to wean their dependence off China. It took a generation for China to take over this market. It'll take a while for us to gain some traction and get it back. But in the meantime, investors can profit.
Yeah, if you think about it, though, you think about the size of China when you look at the continent of Asia, right? And you look at how much of that is China, right? And you look at how much land they have. It's a given that they're going to have a large amount of these rare earth metals, right? And of course, not all land is the same. Not all land's going to have rare earth metals like this. But when you have so much, you're gonna find it.
Correct.
Now, I wanted to ask you because it's actually been in the media a lot lately about what's going on up in Greenland, right? With the ice that's melting, it's actually exposing a lot of rare earth metals, specifically iridium and things like that, stuff that's being used for electric cars or phones and things like that. I saw something the other day where they were talking about the ice is melting and they're finding these people are going now to go mine and get these rare earth metals. And some people were saying, hey, how does that really help? And the thing is, like, a lot of these metals that they're taking is actually going to help, like green technology, like you were saying, right? Maybe help reverse some of this ice melting that's going on. So it's almost taking the unfortunate situation with the ice melting there and, you know, turning it into a positive by getting a lot of stuff that's going to be used for this green technology that will help reverse some of that. So what are your thoughts on what's going on up there right now? Do you think that this is an opportunity? Do you think that right now you're going to be able to get stuff at a much better price because now there's more of it? And then as it gets mined and it goes away, is this like more of a long-term play? What are your thoughts on that? Are you a business owner that constantly struggles with your CRM system and keeping in touch with clients? Well, let me tell you about the CRM system that I personally use. It's called HiveMind CRM, and I'm telling you, it's been a fantastic addition to my tool belt as a real estate investor, as a business owner, and as a financial coach. Go check it out at averagejoefinances.com/CRM. You're gonna love it. Again, that's averagejoefinances.com/CRM.
What's going on, everybody? So today I want to talk to you about Buzzsprout. The Average Joe Finances podcast recently switched over to Buzzsprout, and I got to say, I am super happy with the progress. Our podcast is now on every single major platform and reaching audiences that we couldn't reach before, which is just super awesome. So thank you to Buzzsprout for being such a great platform, but also I want to say, hey guys, if you sign up for Buzzsprout and you sign up for one of their paid plans using our link, you'll get a $20 Amazon gift card. So go check them out. It's averagejoefinances.com/Buzzsprout, and we'll make sure the link is in the show notes below. Let's get back to today's episode.
Yeah, good point. Despite the name, Mike, rare earths are not all that rare. They can be sort of found in abundance. Plenty of them in North America, Australia, Africa. Greenland now is saying they have them. Turkey, about 6 months, announced they have trillions. But that's not where it's at. I'll tell you where it's at. And most people, I was talking to, there's a guy in the US, his name is Jack Lifton. He's, in my mind, the foremost authority on rare earths in the world. He lives in Detroit. And he was telling me there's only about 200 people in all of the US that really knows the story with rare earths, right? And here's the deal, right? They're never found, they're always found that as a byproduct of another raw material. I'll use gallium as an example. Gallium is always found as a byproduct of mining aluminum. So you can only, it has to be separated. It's mathematical, it's complicated, it's expensive. You need geologists, you need metallurgists. So it's not that you can't find them, it's separating them and separating them well enough that you're getting enough of them.
That you get a higher purity level.
Exactly. And here's the difference is Europe and the US, we don't have the technology China has. China is about 30 years ahead of the rest of the world with metallurgy, with geology, specifically relating to rare earths. And so even if you do find if there is a massive amount there, extracting them, separating them, and getting good purity levels, China is just way ahead of us, you know.
I gave that example before with what we're mining here in the States, out in California, that we're still sending a majority of that to China for them to refine it and
Right.
back to us. And that comes with a cost, right? They're not just, oh yeah, we'll do that for free. So we're sitting here shipping all of this stuff to them for them to refine it and then send it back. And it's like you said, they've got the technology. They've got this put together where we're like in the infant stages still.
Yeah. Do you know as well, Mike, recently, you can Google all this, you'll see there was in a very rare occurrence of agreement, both President Trump and President Biden signed executive orders recognizing the US needs to wean its dependence off China, right? Within about 4 weeks of that happening, the US Department of Defense signed an agreement with Linus Corp in Australia. Linus, the second largest producer after China. They're not that big, but they're after China, they're next. And Linus will come from Australia now to the US to refine rare earths just for the US military. The Department of Defense got up ahead of everybody else nearly to do this. Because, for example, the US Army has said they're going to field an all-electric, non-tactical fleet by 2035 and an all-electric tactical fleet by 2050. And they know they don't have the technology in the US. So what you're going to see over the next 10 years is Europe and the US will try to get more in the game. And they will eventually, but it'll take time. Just graduating metallurgists from college and has been graduating about 200 a week for the last 30 years. The US and Europe have been graduating about 200 a year. So we're way behind on that. But you will see, that's why I jumped on this as an investment and business opportunity, is for the next 12, 15, 20 years, if you own these metals, you're in a look, I'll give you some of the numbers in a minute, but they way outperform gold and silver. Just to give you a quick idea, right? In the last 10 years, gold is up. I don't know why people consider gold a hedge against inflation anymore. It's only gone up 7% in 10 years. That's nothing, right? For the last, say, 5 years, rare earth on average, like I'm giving you the average number, are up 34.25% a year. That's a very good return. If you put in 100,000 5 years ago, your portfolio would be worth 275. And during that time, there was no major geopolitical situation. Go back to the 5 years before that. In 2010, the Japanese actually, and again, you can Google this, you'll see it in the US newspapers as well. The Japanese detained a Chinese a trawler, a captain of a fishing trawler, because he was fishing in disputed water. So they held him, right? In retaliation, the Chinese restricted the quotas of rare earths to Japan. Within a few months, we saw some of them go up quintuple, it went up 5 times as much. So I suppose the point I'm trying to say to you is they're a very good investment, and at the very minimum, you will get a nice return. But if China decides we're not going to use these sort of rare earths, which they've threatened to do again, that's when you could see prices spike.
Yeah, absolutely. Because they do have a very large monopoly of it. And if they're like the majority refinery, right, and the majority provider of these rare earth metals, if things get a little hairy with them and they decide to scale back, what you already have will go up in value significantly. And that's something that you need to be paying attention to. No matter what you invest in, you always want to pay attention to a couple things. You want to pay attention to the market. You also want to pay attention to the politics, right? What's going on internationally that might affect this? What's going on nationally, like where you live, that might affect this? What's going on geopolitically in those regions that might affect this, right? So if you're paying attention to all that, you're watching all these key indicators, you can make some damage, right? You can put a dent in whatever you're trying to do. I think that's very important. And I think what you just stated there with what happened, like that example that you just gave with what happened between Japan and China with that fishing boat, and what was the outcome of that from something so what seems like minuscule, and what that turned into for people that already owned these precious metals. But then going back a little bit further with what you were talking about with the actual average annual return right now being 34% is huge. You don't even see some of those returns in real estate unless you're getting a really good flip. And right now, that's not something you're seeing too much of right now in today's market. This is definitely something to keep an eye on for people that might be interested in this. Right now might be the best time to go check it. Yeah. Louis, that's awesome, man. That's
just
awesome.
One thing I'll add, Mike, before we go on, you mentioned the thing in Japan, right?
Yeah.
Again, just a little bit of Googling, you'll see, wow, this is real. This happened. The price has spiked. What's happening at the moment that people aren't really aware of, right, is this Taiwan situation, right? What's really going on there is Taiwan produces 92% of the world's semiconductors. The other 8% are produced in South Korea. The US and China and Europe are dependent upon Taiwan for these. They're the best. That's the best they make the best ones and they dominate the market. Now, if there was to be a situation with Taiwan and that production was limited or subjected to some sort of disruption, that would cost the car industry alone something like 200 billion, right? Now, there's a little bit of posturing going on. There's a bit of flexing the muscles and stuff. But what's also key to know there is two of the key raw materials in semiconductors are gallium and germanium, which China has control over. If China decided to restrict those quotas as a threat as these trade tensions or these tensions escalate, anyone who's holding gallium and germanium is in for a nice spike. So there's stuff like this going on all the time, right in front of us, but we don't know exactly the background. And as you said, it's important to get yourself, if you're interested in a particular industry, get as politically savvy or geopolitically savvy as you can. And amazingly, it's so easy to do. I mentioned it earlier. Just put in, if you just do a Google alert when we finish rare earths, by tomorrow morning you'll get 3 newspaper articles from all over the world on rare earths, and within about 10 days, 2 weeks, you'll know exactly what's going on.
Yeah, no, that's a very key point. And again, you got to know the market. You got to know what you're going into. And that's any investment that you want to get involved in. Understand the risks, understand the benefits, because with risk comes gain. You have to learn about it too. I talk about this all the time in regards to real estate as well. People that want to get started, get involved. I always talk about you need to educate yourself, right? You need to educate yourself, get a mentor or a coach. Then you need to network with other people that are interested in the same things as you and learn from them. And then you need to take action, because those other 3 things mean nothing without action. right?
Mhm.
So yeah, Louis, that's awesome. I want to transition this into something that I call the final round.
Okay.
Because I think we got some really great information, great content. I know I got some really awesome notes. And when we get off this call, I'm going to be setting up some Google alerts to see what's going on, to learn a little bit more about this industry myself, because you've definitely piqued my interest. This conversation went a different route than I was expecting it to go. Like I said, I've talked with people. I've had people on before that we've talked precious metals, we've talked rare earth metals, but you've really got me thinking in a different way when it comes to this. That's awesome. So if you're ready to go, we'll get this party started on the final round.
Yes, indeed. I'm ready.
All right, so let's do it. I guess let's keep this tied to what you're doing in precious metals. We'll keep this business related, but what's the biggest mistake you've ever made or worst business decision you've ever made?
I think probably going back a while now, and I think I'm a bit better at this nowadays, was I didn't stay the course. I had a good idea. It's actually when I started, I invested in property. The first property I bought, I was like 23 years of age. I was in Germany. And I remember saying to him, and I'll always remember because I went to the company I was working for. I went to Woodbury, New York for some meetings. And there was a gentleman there from New York, and I was having a beer with him at the bar, and he gave me great advice. And I told him I'd already bought a property. He said, Louis, you need to make a goal and buy a property, say, every 3 years for the next. And I'd already was on that track, and I just got distracted, and I think in some ways, and this is maybe the best or the worst advice you can give, is if you have a good idea and, intuitively it is, just keep going forward and don't pay any attention to anyone that maybe tries to pull you off that or off track, or people, places, or things that might pull you off it. Just stay the course. And I'm talking about not every idea that I have or anybody has is a great idea. Those little gifts from the universe that come in quietly and more intuitively, those ones that you just come to you and stay the course. And I didn't, and that's a regret. In some ways, I did get back to it later.
You got to trust your gut. You got to trust your intuition, right? A lot of times it's going to tell you it's because there's something in the back of your brain. There's something in your thoughts that's telling you to do it because deep down inside, it's the right move to make. And a lot of times we ignore that little voice. We ignore that Jiminy Cricket that's on our shoulder and say, get off, you're bugging me, bug. Yeah. Oh man. Okay, good. So the next question kind of ties into this, right? And it's, what is something that you've learned that you wish you knew when you first got started?
Good question, yeah. I think it would be, there's a sort of, I suppose it's down to nearly due diligence, but more than that, which is sometimes when something is presented in front of me or to us in general, if we don't know too much about it, we can be dismissive of it. We can be sort of prejudiced before we've even investigated it. And it happened to me again. I remember hearing about Bitcoin back in 2009, 2010. Actually, it was in Kuwait. It was a US DOD contractor was telling me about it. He was mining Bitcoin on a laptop back then. And I went, what do you mean? But contempt before investigation. And I try to remember nowadays that, if something comes in front of me, whether I think it's great or whether I think it's bad, if I don't know much about it, find out, do the investigation, do the due diligence, find out, are you right? Don't be dismissive without proper investigation.
Yeah, that's a very good point. That's a very good lesson learned. Don't be dismissive right off the bat. Be open-minded when it comes to something brand new that you don't know about.
Yeah.
Just go out there and actually learn about it instead of just being dismissive right off the bat. I know I still don't know enough about crypto or NFTs or any of that stuff. And I do sometimes get dismissive of it because I don't know enough, because I haven't done the research on it, because my focus is elsewhere and I like where I'm headed right now and want to kind of stick with that. You can't do everything, right? You can't do everything, but don't be dismissive of it. 100%.
Exactly. And also we've learned as well now, there's such a thing as unconscious bias, right? We have unconscious bias. So we're sort of programmed to see something a certain way and based on what our current point of view is. So it's almost like I need to get out of my comfort zone as much as possible to get another point of view. Just my view is not enough. That's why it's good as well to have mentors and people you trust that will tell you the truth, that won't tell you what you want to hear, but they'll tell you the truth. But we can be our own worst enemy. And no matter who have those conscious and unconscious bias that can prevent us from further discovery, further education, further perspective.
Yeah, Louis, that's huge. Yeah, definitely another reason why I think it's important to have a mentor or a coach, right? Somebody that's going to help you think outside of the box that you normally think of. Awesome. All right. So this question kind of ties into all this as well. And that's, do you have any tips or tricks that you would recommend to somebody that's just getting started today? Let's say there's somebody that's a seasoned investor in other areas and they want to start looking at these rare earth metals. What would you recommend to them, like research wise or anything like that?
Yeah, I think proper investigation, like a full investigation. And thankfully, with technology and stuff, we can do a lot of it ourselves now without costing a great deal of money. And you mentioned earlier as well, or you go with the gut, pay attention to the gut. Yeah, because, funny enough, I see now, when I was speaking with you earlier, Mike, I could see from talking to you, you have a bit of a natural curiosity and I can tell you're interested in learning more. And I'm not saying that you were excited about rare earths, you were excited about learning something new. You know what I mean? And I could see that in you. But the usual response I get is not that. I've been doing sales, if you will, a long time. And when I start talking to people about rare earths, usually in about 10 seconds, their eyes are glazing over and they're falling asleep. But they don't know what they're missing out on. And that's unconscious bias as well. Now, I'm not saying it's for everybody. It's not. But I owe it to myself and I owe it to you. We owe it to ourselves to fully investigate whatever it might be, even if it's just a discussion in a bar or about politics or whatever it is. It's just important to really, do I really know what I'm talking about? How much of this have I investigated? How much do I really know? And it's amazing how quickly then we can become reasonably educated on something. Again, we were talking about technology of Google, and you can just find out everything if you want at the touch of a button. So yeah, just do that investigation.
Yeah, Louis, I love your answer because it ties into the very next question I'm going to ask, because you're talking about how you should educate yourself about this stuff first, right? Don't have that unconscious bias. Now, somebody to educate themselves, they would probably want to look for good resources to learn about this. So do you have a favorite business or investing book or podcast or both that you would recommend to somebody that wants to learn more?
Yeah, very good. Do you know what I find, Mike, and it's a bit of a philosophical answer maybe, is once, if you want to, like, the journey of 1,000 miles begins with the first step, right? Once you get on that road, let's say, as you're talking about financial freedom and passive income and things like that, as soon as somebody makes the decision, they maybe listen to your podcast and they go, you know something, I want to learn more about this, what Mike is talking about. I know there's more out there. And as soon as they decide to, once you go on that path, what I have experienced is the path will always open up to you. It will always open up for you, but you have to make that step. So I suppose I wouldn't say I have a particular book or podcast, because if you stay on the journey, every day stuff's coming to you. It's almost been attracted to you. Do you know what I mean? So I would just say, look, just take that first step, whatever that first step is, take it. Keep going, and all this stuff will come to you. What's right for you comes to you. Just certain people who are our friends and our family, where like is attracted to, isn't it? Same thing with this.
Yeah, I love that. Closed doors don't open themselves, right? You have to take that action and open the door and go look and see what's on the other side. And by doing that, go out there and do the research. Go out there and look this stuff up. So now that you've listened to this episode, you've got this wave top understanding of kind of what Louis and I were talking about here. For those that are listening right now, or they want to learn more about rare earth metals, they want to learn more about you and your company and how they could maybe possibly even invest with you as well. Where can people find this information? Do you have a website, any social media profiles you could share with us? Where can people find you, Louis?
Sure. Obviously, the website is the first place maybe to go to. You can download the digital prospectus. So that would be Strategic Metals Invest. If anybody wants to, they can email me directly. It's Louis, Louis, at strategicmetalsinvest.com. And of course, I'm on LinkedIn and Facebook and stuff. But yeah, email me or go to the website is a good.
There you have it. So Louis, I'll make sure I have those links in the show notes to make it easier for everybody to either just copy and paste or click away. But again, thank you so much for coming on the show today. I think this conversation was awesome. I know I learned a lot. I got a lot of great notes. I'm going to go set up some Google alerts now and start learning a little bit more, because you definitely piqued my curiosity for sure. So thanks again for coming on.
Thank you, Mike. A pleasure. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And to my listeners that are here with us right now, thank you so much for joining me and our special guest, Louis O'Connor, on the Average Joe Finances podcast. Go leave us a 5-star review and tell us what you liked about today's episode with Louis. Aloha from Hawaii, and have a great rest of your day. Thank you for making it to the end of this episode. Greatly appreciate you being here with me today on the Average Joe Finances podcast. If you haven't done so yet, make this the episode that you go leave us a 5-star rating or subscribe to our YouTube channel. The Average Joe Finances podcast is for informational and entertainment purposes only. Have an outstanding day.
Thanks for listening to the Average Joe Finances Podcast, your source for beating debt, saving money, and investing. Learn more at averagejoefinances.com.